And welcome back to the Livingston Parish News Weekly Show, a podcast brought to you by the Livingston Parish News. My name is McHugh David, publisher and editor of the news, and this is Around Livingston. It's where I sit down with this gentleman. We talk about, shocker, what's going on around Livingston. So we're going to let him introduce himself this morning. Good morning, sir.
Good morning. This is David Gray, news writer with the Livingston Parish News.
Plenty to talk about today. First and foremost, McHugh David, there we go, sat down this morning. We're recording this on Monday morning, March 20th. Sat down with Principal Jason St. Pierre from Walker High School to talk about the 1 cent sales tax proposal, which is going to be on the ballot this Saturday. So check that out. If you didn't see it yesterday, we're posting this on Tuesday. And of course, we posted our interview with him yesterday, which is Monday, the day we're recording this. It's a lot of explanation. We ran the podcast yesterday, but we're going to let David talk a little bit about the proposal itself, which is on this Saturday's ballot. Of course, early voting concluded this past Saturday, which was also the celebration of St. Patrick's Day. We'll get to that in a minute.
Yeah, so like you said, this is the 1 cent sales tax that has been on the that has been the center of debate for the last several months. This is to fund salary and benefit increases for all Livingston Parish public school employees. It's about 3,700 employees. And this school leaders are saying this will move the Livingston Parish school employee ranking near the top for all categories, such as teachers, bus drivers, custodians, 25-year plus teachers, all of that. It'll move them to the top ranking for their salary. Right now, Livingston Parish for the last several years has been near the bottom, which is something that school leaders attribute to the lack of funding. So this is something that they say will provide that extra funding. The 1 cent sales tax is expected to generate like around $24 million. They say that in order to give the 10% increase or 2,500 floor increase to all employees, they're saying they need about 20 million to do that, and that other 4 million will be put in basically a reserve account to be used in case they ever they have to tap into that for later years in case sales tax revenue doesn't do as well one year. So they'll have that, and then anything above that extra 4 million, I believe, or the quarter of that would go to basically be a 13th check for teachers. So like you said, early voting ended, and I actually just got the early voting numbers. About 4,000 people took part in early voting. That doesn't count the absentee mail-in ballots, but that's about 4% of your 88,000 registered voters. So considering this has been gotten a lot of attention on social media, all that, I thought it'd be a little higher personally, but we'll see how the polls actually go out.
That's still a lot for a spring early vote.
That's still a lot for early vote. Now, like you said, last year, I think, because last year there were two property taxes on the ballot. You had one that was a renewal for the school system, and then a new one for Livingston Parish Fire Protection District 4. And I believe that drew I want to say less than 2%. So like you said, yes, there is more. There is a higher turnout for a March election, but just based on the buzz that this one has had, I thought it'd be a little bit higher. But like you said, 4,000 for a March election is still pretty good. So we'll see how it ends this week after the polls close on Saturday, March 25th.
And one thing that Principal St. Pierre brought up a lot that I will add here, and it's something, of course, you've dug into, as have I. The school board's budget is 90% spent before the fiscal year even starts, mostly on salaries. So they have about 10% to work with, and of course, a lot of that is maintenance and other such things. It's also important to remember that a lot of these individual districts have their own funds. That was one of the reasons that Denham was able to do some of the things they did with their fields. So it's important to remember that a lot of the money is sort of mandated to be spent already. So trimming fat is difficult. And for those of you who may be wondering, well, what in the world does that mean? Think about the state's budget as well. It's mostly the same. A lot of that money is constitutionally mandated to be spent on specific things before they even hit go.
Yeah.
So it's important to remember that. Obviously, he brought that up. That would be Principal St. Pierre multiple times on the podcast we did with him. Of course, please go check that out. Moving on. We did discuss briefly last week. Unfortunately, there was a fire at Benton Brothers in Denham Springs in the downtown district. They seem, I don't want to call it upbeat, but they at least seem like they're ready to move forward with some things. You had a chance to speak with the family. You did a little deeper dive on it. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I spoke with, like we said, Benton Brothers has been a family business basically since 1938 when it opened. It opened as a furniture store by Leslie Benton and his two brothers. And then I believe in the early 90s is when it became a antique store in the Antique Village. And one of the most historic buildings there is in Denham Springs and really all of Livingston Parish. There was, like we said, there was more. I haven't seen that much support for a place in a long time. Just judging by all the stuff that we saw on social media, whenever the Benton brothers posted on their Facebook page about the fire, and then that story that we posted, a little blurb, a few paragraphs long, and it's one of the biggest stories because this place means that much to so many people. And I spoke with the owners last week. I did a kind of a walk with them, and they said that it was heartbreaking. It's like a family member uh, being gone. And what I found most surprising is since it opened, that store really has not been closed for prolonged periods of time. There was some during COVID, obviously, where that was everything was closed, but Benton Brothers was one of the few places during in the Antique Village during the flood that did not take on any water. That's just kind of how fortunate it has been. I remember speaking with Miss Sissy Grantham, whose family started the business and who she owns a building now. She said during Hurricane Betsy, some windows got knocked out, and she. Other than that, and that was in 1965. She can't really remember many other times where they had a lot of damage to the buildings, where they had to close and do big projects. Other than sometimes when they did some upgrades and renovations just to improve the store, but nothing like this. This was by far what she said the worst thing that the store has ever had to endure. But they spoke optimistically that they do plan on opening one day again. Now, no, when I spoke with them last week, they still hadn't even. They're still going through all the items that could be salvaged, and I guess getting rid of the ones that could not be. So it's just kind of hard to tell when that'll be. But we're hoping that one day we'll be able to write a positive story on them reopening again.
Looking forward to that. Of course, I grew up here, went in there with my mother and father on many occasions. So I know Miss Sissy Benton Grantham. So she used to do interior design. I think she's retired. At any rate, also talking about things that the Denham Springs downtown appreciate. How about parades?
Yeah.
And they had their first ever. We're kind of going off script here, but they had their first ever St. Patrick's Day parade this Saturday in the evening. Trying not to conflict with the Baton Rouge one, which has been going on for a while. So tell us a little bit about how that went down.
Yeah, that was pretty short and sweet. Not the parade, but the explanation will be pretty short and sweet. But yeah, it followed the normal Denham parade route. It was cold that day, and it had been. This was like the day after, because Friday we had that bad rain for a good bit, and then the temperatures just plummeted, and you wake up Saturday morning a little fearful that it's drizzling a little bit and it's still cold, so you're worried that that's going to happen because people who went to the Mardi Gras parade in February, they'll remember that day was cold and wet. By far the most miserable parade experience I've had covering one. But St. Patty's Day turned out fine. It was a big turnout considering this was their first one, and like you said, this is the same day of the Baton Rouge St. Patrick's Day parade, which many people in Denham have been going to for years because that was the only one in the area to go to. But there was dozens of floats. I mean, you had hundreds of people out there in the Antique Village, and by the time the parade rolled through at 5, it was the rain had completely cleared out. It was still a little overcast, but nothing too crazy. But yeah, I think this is one that will grow in years to come because for a lot of people, I know a lot of people brought out their families, and that's the one thing about doing these parades in Denham. It's they're more of a family atmosphere here versus other areas. So I think this is one that's going to stick around for a while.
Going to be interesting to see how they market it next year and how it grows. Obviously, it was a very popular story when you first spoke to the downtown district and they told you about it. So obviously, something that people wanted here. Before we get into some court news to wrap up the show, do want to talk about something going on in the city of Denham in regard to sewer impact fees. And if you're curious as to what those are, that is what owners of any kind of utility typically charge developers as they start hooking up new homes, trailers, whatever, to try to defray costs later of updating these systems. And this one is in regard to Denham's sewer system. So tell us a little bit about their newest decision to. And this goes hand in hand, I believe, with a lot of the big developments occurring south of the city, which the city still serves sewer too. That was a lot of S's. I'm sorry.
No, this is, last year, 2022 was the year of development, I guess you could say. That was when you had these big subdivisions that were working through the parish council, and had a lot of people up in arms about the parish's ability to be able to have all these new subdivisions with the infrastructure the way that it is. Traffic, drainage, sewer already issues. And then when you add on, in some cases, thousands of new homes, thousands of new people, that's just going to worsen those problems, a lot of people were saying. And so the Denham City Council last year, they voted to impose a moratorium on new connections to the sewer system, new connections of 10 homes or more. And this would have affected some of the developers on 4-H Club Road, Sweetwater and Deer Run specifically. I believe that's about 2,500 homes combined. Those two subdivisions were going to bring up 4-H Club Road, and the city would have been responsible for providing sewer. So they imposed that moratorium. Not that it was really going to, because Deer Run, the preliminary plats for those two subdivisions were just approved last year. So in some cases, it would be 10 years before all those homes would be built. But by that time, you can't wait if you're a city, you can't wait to do something then to address the sewer issue. So they imposed a moratorium to give them time to kind of research to see what to do. And basically, they are now going to require developers of large developments to pay the sewer impact fees up front. Sewer impact fee per lot is about $3,800, they said. So basically, if you are the developer of a subdivision with 150 lots or more, you have to pay all of that $3,800 per lot up front. So say for a subdivision like Deer Run, if it wanted to connect to the city's water, that's 2,000 lots. I think that's around $7,000 if they were to pay all of those up front to connect to the city's sewer. Is that
$7.6 million?
Okay, so there you go. So yeah, that's what they would have to pay up front. And then Sweetwater, that's 400 and so lots, I believe. So whatever that is, yeah. I mean, so basically, they're going to require these developers to pay those up front, because that will give the city some money to then expand its services where needed. They're not turning developers away, but they're saying that they are going to require these developers to pitch in to be able to service them. Now, I believe if it's 50 to 150 lots, then it's half up front. And then if it's less than 50, it's how it is now, which is basically when the individual home applies for a water meter, that's when they typically have been required to pay the impact fee historically. So that will stay the same, because that's a little more easier to absorb, I guess they felt up to 50 lots versus, in Deer Run's case, 2,000. That's where you're having to have some serious conversations about expanding them, because right now the city, the sewer system is around 50% at 50% capacity right now, and these new subdivisions would have pushed it to over 75%. And at 70% is when you really have to start thinking about expanding your current facilities to be able to meet the projected future growth. So that's what they passed at the last meeting. But yeah, that's kind of the moratorium on new connections is technically expired now. So we'll see how this affects these big subdivisions that are still working through the system.
So that's a lot.
Yeah.
So, obviously those two developments south of Denham have been very contentious at the parish council level. And now you've got a separate player trying to protect themselves, because of potential problems with their utilities. Obviously, you have current customers, and that's something you hear from both the city and the parish. We have people who currently live here. We have current customers. We feel like we need to protect them first.
Yeah.
So we'll see. We'll see how that affects development going forward for the city of Denham Springs. Last but certainly not least, We do have a bit of court news surrounding Blaise and Fife. So if you'll bring us up to date on that to round out the show.
Yeah, that was last week that was the second murder trial for Blaise Fife. He was accused of shooting a Walker man in 2017 when he had just turned 18 before that, and it took the jury trying to look how long, about 2 hours to find him guilty. This followed his trial that lasted about 4 days last week. But yeah, so I mean, sentencing is set for in April, but second-degree murder charge carries a lifetime sentence without the benefit of probation, parole, or suspension of sentence. So unless there's an appeal, I haven't heard about if his attorney is going to file one or not. That is basically he was found guilty again. And like I said, this trial came about because the Supreme Court ruled that serious charges required a unanimous verdict from juries, and his verdict in his first trial in 2019 was not unanimous. So that's why this second one came about. It just took a few years for it to actually carry on. But yeah, that ended last week, and he was found guilty again.
So, and you've had a lot of court news lately. Hopefully that'll quiet down. For those of you who don't know, it's tough to cover court news because you can't bring a phone in, you can't do any of that.
Old school.
Yeah, you just kind of have to sit there and watch and listen and take notes on the good old legal pad.
Yes.
or your reporter's notebook. I always heard in business you want to write everything down on a notepad because kind of like when we print the paper, it's there then. It's on ink. It's done. And you've gotten it out of your head. So thank you, sir, for having the patience to do that. And we appreciate you covering all that. If you'll introduce yourself.
Hey, this is David Gray, news writer with the Livingston Parish News.
And my name is McHugh David, publisher and editor of the news. Appreciate you guys out there for joining us for the Livingston Parish News Weekly Show. Please remember the news is on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, and YouTube. We are once a week in print on Thursdays at $7 a month. Get that in your mailbox. We're also online, www.livingstonparishnews.com. One last time, we appreciate you joining us, and we'll see you next time.